What's up, everybody? Welcome all of our guests, every campus today. So excited to be with you. We are in a series called Hopefully, and I want to kick it off with a question today. When was the last time that you stopped to think about why you're here? Not just here, like in Sunnyvale, Fremont, San Jose, or in your PJs online maybe, but here as in the Bay Area, the city that you find yourself in, the community that you get to live in, the job that you have, maybe the school that you're currently attending. Like, why are you here? Is it all chance? Is it all a circumstance of choices? Is it all of that? Or is there a bigger reason why you're here? Is it just coincidence? I think back often on my events throughout my life, and I wonder, is it all coincidence, the time and the place that certain things happen? For example, when I was in high school, there was a specific day I was lost, I didn't know God, and I was actually dealing drugs at my school, and I went to school one morning, and there was police there. And they caught me at a specific time, a specific place that I don't have time to talk about, but because of that specific time and place, it led to my eyes being open and my life eventually being transformed. And I often wonder, what if that hadn't happened at that specific time and place? Or maybe in college, I decided to go to a Friday night concert at a local church. And I show up to this concert, and there is this beautiful woman named Mandy. And she looks at me, and she falls in love instantly. Just kidding. But we meet on a Friday night concert, and I often think, what if that wasn't all an accident, right? It couldn't be that there's something bigger than just our choices leading us to times and places. Sometimes it's the opposite. Like I get my hair cut at Supercuts, which is sometimes dangerous. But there's beautiful, great people there, and I have a monthly subscription to Supercuts, $17, unlimited haircuts, incredible. Sometimes you get what you pay for, but still. And there's like one lady at my Supercuts who is terrible at cutting hair. All of the rest are awesome. But the last 2 times I show up, I walk in, there's like 8 workers, and guess who's the only one available? The one lady. So I looked at her and I was like, so good to see you. But inside I'm like, man, again, wrong place, wrong time. But is it coincidence? Is it choice? You know, maybe you're exploring faith here and you say, well, all that stuff, like all these events of life are just, it's fate, it's coincidence, serendipity, whatever you might call it. But could it be that there's a divine hand at work in orchestrating events of our lives so that we would eventually look up to God and be changed by Him? What I've realized throughout life is that the more I seek God, the more I pray, the more I know God, the more that apparent coincidences start to happen for a greater purpose in my life. And I've become convinced now that your time and my time and place on earth are divinely orchestrated. That there are specific seasons of life and specific places that we find ourselves in. That was not just coincidence. It was not just, our choices that led us there, but God orchestrated certain things in our lives to put us in that specific time and place. In 2002, Pastor Rick Warren wrote this book called Purpose-Driven Life, and he was answering the question, what on earth am I here for? It's a big question. Like, why did God place me in this place and time that I find myself in? It became the best-selling hardcover nonfiction book in human history. 50 million copies sold, translated to 137 languages. The only book in more languages than this book is actually the Bible. And the reason why this book became so popular is because it addressed the ultimate question that most of us would acknowledge we ask. Why am I here? Is it a purpose? Is there a reason behind all of this? And we're going to unpack some of that question today. If you have your Bible, we're going to be in Acts chapter 17. And we're going to talk about an event that happened in the life of a man called Paul. Now, if you've been to church, you might have heard of Paul before, but Paul was a first century intellectual who vowed to destroy Christianity in the first century. So he did not believe what Jesus claimed to have come to do, but eventually he had an encounter with Jesus post-crucifixion. So he knew Jesus had died, and yet he now saw him alive, and he converted. He became a Christian, a follower of the way, and began to travel all over the Middle East, starting churches in different cities and encouraging believers to spread the message of the resurrected King. And he found himself in a city called Athens in Greece. It's still there today if you've been to Athens. Beautiful city. And in this city, it says in chapter 17, verse 16, that he was there waiting, and he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. By the way, when you read the Bible, it's really important to read and say, God, would you speak to me through this? It's not just an account of history. It's God trying to communicate and to pause at times and pay attention. God, what is really happening? As I read this a few weeks ago, I paused at this word, greatly distressed. And I began to think about, what does this actually mean? The original text, it's this word called provoked in spirit. He was feeling this uneasiness in his gut, in his spirit, because he was looking at a city, a region that was deeply lost, without purpose, without God. They were worshiping all kinds of things that we call idols. Now, idols can be an actual item that is crafted by a human hand that people did worship in Athens and throughout history still do today. But idols are much bigger than that. Idols are anything we place before our God. It's whatever gets the most of our attention, our affection, and our energy. So in a region, idols could be the quest for success. It's whatever we set our hearts to that takes priority of our energy and time and affection. So it can be money. An idol can be an actual person. Like if I just have that person, then I'm going to be happy. An idol can be a dream, a vision, and a way to innovate. It can be anything that we place before our God. And Paul is now looking at this city, Athens, and he's realizing, oh my goodness, they were worshiping all kinds of things, but they don't know God. And it broke his heart. And when I read that, I just couldn't stop thinking about our region. How often we forget that we are in a region where most people don't know the life and the power and the presence of God, and how often I don't let that become trouble in my spirit. And here's Paul pausing. This is not okay. So I love what he did, verse 17. So he reasoned in the synagogue with Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happen to be there. And I don't know if you notice what's happening, but most of the time when you enter a place that is uncomfortable for you, that people are different than you, that they worship all kinds of other things, it's what sometimes Christians call a lost place, a broken place. Most people run away from that kind of place, and yet Paul took a step toward them. And the reality is this, that when you have God's heart is inside of you, you move toward the lost, the least, and the lowly, not away. In other words, the people of God ought to be like firefighters. Whenever there is a problem in society, whenever there's fire and brokenness and losses, we are not the ones that run toward comfort. We're the ones that run toward the pain and the brokenness because we know the God of hope. And here's Paul burdened by the location he finds himself in, and he's thinking, man, I got to take a step toward them. This reminded me a couple weeks ago, the mayor of San Jose asked our church if we would send volunteers to help clean up this massive trash area by the airport. And so we did a call for volunteers, and 100 Echo volunteers showed up and cleaned up this huge space that was just overwhelmingly full of trash. And as I'm meeting with one of the city staff members that works with the mayor, she said, we have the hardest time getting volunteers to do stuff like this, but you guys just brought 100 people to do it. And the reality is this, that when there is people like many here at Echo who understand the heart of God, we don't just complain about problems. We're not bothered by problems. We're burdened by them, which means we move toward them. When we see places that are lost and broken, we say, God, would you allow me to be a part of the solution? And the more God's heart grows in us, the more this happens. And I love how he began to impact this city he felt burdened for. It says in verse 17 that he reasoned in the synagogue as well as in the marketplace. Notice that when you're trying to transform a region, it is not enough to just create places of worship and say, everybody gather here for places of worship. Paul knew that to transform a region, we have to be active in worship spaces, that's the synagogue, and in workplaces. And he knew this more than any other church leader in the first century. He worked in a workplace and he was a church leader. And this is a reminder for those of us here in our Echo community as well, that God has placed you not just in this church for a reason, but also in your workplace for a reason. That there is a mission of God there for you. And when so many people leave the region for all kinds of other reasons, Christians are the ones that should ask, wait. Instead of leaving for comfort, could it be that God wants me to stay for mission? Could it be that I'm in the same exact place and time because God has a purpose at my school and in my neighborhood, in my workplace, and maybe even the gym I go to, and the Starbucks and Pete's Coffee and Phil's Cafe that I go to? Whatever it might be, could it be that there's something bigger at play? That to transform a region, we need all of us living on mission in this relationship between places of worship and workplaces. But then listen to what happens. Verse 18. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with Paul. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" And others remarked, "He seems to be advocating for foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Now, just to note here, there's two philosophies in the day that they're present in, the Stoics and the Epicureans. And what they represent is actually still what we base our lives on most of the time here in America. The Epicureans were the people that believed in like the American dream, that the purpose of life is just to be happy and to have pleasure. So pleasure is the ultimate goal of Epicureans. So they're debating this and they're having these conversations around, and now the Stoics were on the other side. They're like, no, pleasure is irrelevant. The purpose of life is virtue. It's like becoming the right kind of person. And they were debating, and Paul comes in and he's like, you know what? I'm an intellectual like you. I've been in philosophy conversations like you, but I now believe there's something way better to base your life on. And it's the fact that Jesus resurrected. It is actually the anchor of the Christian message. The anchor of our message and our belief system is not even the Bible. It is the fact that in history, Jesus died and then he conquered death on a cross by coming out of a grave. And Paul was so convinced of this that now, even though he is an intellectual with them, he's saying, you know what, it's not pleasure, it's not virtue alone. What really matters is if it's true. If it's true that this man named Jesus, whom I saw die, whom I was killing their followers, if it's true that he conquered the grave, and I believe he did because I saw him alive after he died, then all of life should be centered on him. And these people were so curious. In fact, it goes on and it says in verse 19, so they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. And then verse 21, this parenthesis is funny. It says, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. So the Areopagus, you might not know what this is, but this is a place that was very significant in their time. This is like being invited to give a TED Talk or to be on a Joe Rogan podcast. Literally, it's like the most it's where all the intellectuals and experts of the day would go. It was on top of a place called the Mars Hill, and I actually went to this place. Let me show you some pictures here. Mars Hill is a hill in Athens that's been preserved for 2,600 years. And it was such a significant place that they decided to preserve it. It's on top of the hill. You can climb up there today. And as you look around the city, you will see, this is me really young, by the way. This is like before I became a lead pastor. You age quick in this church. But then let me show you what happens as you look around the city. You look around and you can see the whole city of Athens, including many temples of worship. And it actually right next to the Areopagus is this place called the Acropolis, which is actually where the temple worship of Athena would take place. And so he's standing on this place where you can see idols and worship and all kinds of people pursuing all kinds of pleasure and trying to figure out the purpose of life. And right here on top of this hill that you can still go on today, he says this. He stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and he said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you're ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you." He's looking around, and I love it that he calls them very religious because philosophers hate being called religious. But you know what he's doing? He's saying you might not even think you're religious, but everybody's worshiping something. You might be worshiping your ideas, worshiping your own intellect and saying, I know more than a creator. You might be worshiping success and money, whatever you're going at. That's your idol, whatever you go after the most in life when you wake up in the morning. He's like, I can see you're very religious. And you're so religious and you're pursuing the answer to the big question in life in all kinds of places, but you even acknowledge that your gods and your idols you've created have left a gap in your heart and you don't know how to answer it with your current idols and your current lifestyle. So you've designed an altar to the unknown God, the one that maybe is the answer to the thing that nothing else answered. And to that one gap in your heart, I want to speak to right now. And then he says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. And he does not live in temples built by human hands, and he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. It's the God that you can't contain in your hands. It's the God you cannot understand with your thoughts. He's the God that gives you breath and life. He says, rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And then he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their land. Time and place. This is really significant right now. It's a significant moment for these people that are trying to find the answer to life. When Paul looks at them, he says, you have a gap. This place is lost. And I want to show you what that gap is. There is a God who has marked out your place and your time on the earth. This region is very similar to the Bay Area. It's got all kinds of people that think they're not religious, but really they're pursuing something that becomes an idol. And that idol still leaves them empty. And Paul is speaking to that gap in their heart. Now, the word time and place are significant because the word time here, there's two words in Greek for time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is where we get the term chronological order, right? It's a sequential time. It is what our clocks or our watches measure. But kairos speak of a specific time or a season. It speaks of such a time as this. And what Paul is saying is that this God who gives you breath to breathe, he's the one that marked out the specific places that we will live, the boundaries of our habitation is the original text. And he's the one that marked out the kairos that you find yourself in, the opportune times of your life. He's trying to draw their attention to the fact that God calls us to steward our time and place in history. And for such a time as this, you've been placed on the earth. And this is important to understand because this means we are held accountable for the opportunities and the of our time and our place. We're held accountable for the stewardship of our time in our generation, which means that if this is true, there's two questions we should be asking ourselves right now, whatever campus you're in, whatever home you live in, should be asking this question: why did God allow me to be born in this generation? What is unique about our time and place right now in existence? What benefits and troubles of our day speak to our purpose? And the second question we should be asking is, why did God place me to live where I currently live? Could it be that it's not an accident? And in fact, Paul answers this specific question that I think they began to ask. And he says this way. He says, God did this in verse 27 so that they would seek him, this is people, and reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. In other words, God is the source of all life, and he orchestrates the time and places for when we live, so that we would know him and make him known. And this is ultimately why he placed us in this region, why he placed you in your workplace, in your school, why there's moments in our life that when we look back, we say, was that a coincidence? Or could it be that there's somebody orchestrating these moments for such a time as this? It's an opportune time. Our purpose is connected to the time and place in which we live. And that purpose is to help as many people know the God who fills the gap that feels unknown to so many, but that he's the actual answer that we're looking for in life. Now, you must be wondering, what is significant then about the place that we live in? And I want to remind you of this, that we actually live in the number one most churchless city in America. You and I, right now, that is a stewardship of our presence in this location. That if you are in the Bay Area, maybe you're in the Churchill Line somewhere else, but if you're in the Bay Area, you live right now in the most unchurched, unreached metropolitan area in this country. It's also the most de-churched, which means not only is it the metropolitan area with the least amount of people that knows our God and that attends church regularly, but it's the one where there used to be people that attended church, but they left and they no longer follow God, so they're pursuing the answers to life in all kinds of other places. And on top of that, we're one of the most technologically advanced areas in the world, the most innovative, with venture capital, with affluence, with influence, with global thinkers, and some of the best universities. All of that combined with the reality that we live in the place with the least amount of Christians of every other city in our country. And could it be that you're here for such a time as this? That when other people leave for comfort, that God calls you to stay for mission. That when other people say, I'm going to go to the place where there's not going to be all kinds of brokenness, that God might just actually be telling you, no, I want you to stay in this place that might be uncomfortable at times for you, because there is something I want to do in this place. Could it be that if you know Jesus, he's placed you here for such a time as this? It's the moment that Esther had to face when she became the queen of Persia, and she saved the Jewish people from genocide when her cousin Mordecai famously told her to use her royal position for such a time as this. And she stepped out in that position and changed the course of the Jewish nation. Or it's a time when Nelson Mandela understood his role in dismantling the apartheid in South Africa and started promoting reconciliation as the country's first black president. Or it's the moment where William Tyndale, who is in the back of almost every single Bible that you have in your house, hundreds of years ago, when he looked at his generation that had created the printing press, and he realized, you know what? What if I am born in this time for such a time as this? And I can leverage my resources to allow the Bible to be printed in multiple languages and spread all over the world. And he stewarded his time and place to that end, all the way to being killed for it, believing there's something greater at place. I believe we're in an opportune time in our region, that there's so many people right now looking to fill the gap of the unknown God to them. And we're here for such a time as this, which is why in this next season, we're going to be challenging everybody in our faith community, all of us together, to deepen our impact and position ourselves for the greatest impact we will have as a church so far in our story this coming year. And to do that, we're going to challenge ourselves in a moment where most people in culture are being consumers in the holidays. We're going to challenge one another with generosity. And I actually want to ask you around your seats today to pick up this trifold right here, because I want to speak to you about this. Right there in front of your seat or under your seat, depending on your campus and location. Try to find this right here. If you have it, hold it in your hands with me. If you're in the warehouse or mezzanine, it should be on your tables as well. If you're hot, you can cool yourself off like this as well with it. But open it up. I want to share with you the challenge for us between now and the end of the year. The challenge is this: to leverage generosity to open divine doors in our city, in our region, and in our personal circles. So you're going to find in here a challenge, first of all, for you to be generous in the places where you live and you work. And we're going to give you all kinds of ideas. In fact, the website that we created has ideas for you on how to bless those that live around you in your workplaces, how to give special gifts and allow businesses around you and co-workers and neighbors to experience the generosity of God flowing through your hands to them. But more than that, we're also going to challenge one another to collective generosity, to stretch ourselves and give above our regular here at Echo. And our goal is an extra $1 million to fuel compassion in our region, because this is the time when the world is at its darkest, the church can be its brightest, but it's going to take all of us. So we're going to be giving you a glimpse into these every week from now on to the end of the year. But I want to highlight a couple of these as you take this home and pray with us as well. If you open it up, you're going to see compassion on your left side. And this is part of what we're fueling, God willing, as we give together to these causes. First of all, we're going to expand what we do with our global partners. There are people all over the world right now that are in poverty and suffering, and in cities where God is not known and the church is not yet thriving. And so we have specifically partnered with different churches around the world that we're going to fuel these partnerships and allow us to become a global impact kind of church. Not only that, one of my favorite initiatives that got launched out of Echo is Foster the City. And our goal with this initiative is to fuel Foster the City beyond even what it's become. But over the last 9 years, 9 years ago, I remember we had this conversation. What would it look like for the waiting list of kids that are by the thousands, by the way, in the counties of California? The waiting list of kids that are looking for loving homes would be replaced by a waiting list of families that's ready to take the kids home. What would it look like? 9 years later, we're celebrating that now there's been 860 kids through Foster the City that found loving homes because of what you've done and given over the last 9 years. Can we celebrate that together? It's worth it. So we're going to fuel this and all kinds of stuff. We'll tell you more about it later. We're going to continue to expand our local compassion efforts, like what we did a couple weeks ago with the mayor, and in every city of every campus, loving our city in deeper ways. And then I'm really excited about this. We're going to be starting 2 more churches next year. So we in the history of Echo, we have now been involved in launching 20 churches over the last 16 years. And next year, we're going to launch 2 more in a really significant way. And I'm excited to tell you that Pastor Chris Parks and Susie are going to be launching a church September of 2025 right here out of Echo in South San Jose. Can we celebrate them for taking that bold step of faith? If you open it up to the middle, you're going to see what's called Next Generation. We are a next generation church. When most people, when they speak of the rising generation, they'll say, they're lost, they're broken, they're the anxious generation, and they put all these labels. We believe that the rising generation is going to transform our region. We believe the rising generation of students and kids and young adults are actually the key to transforming the region that we get to live in. So we're going to put more fuel behind this than ever before. We're starting a new program called Tyrannus Academy, or Coaching Academy, led by Pastor Gene and Queen Kyocho. And it's going to be awesome. We're going to share more with you in coming weeks in just developing the faith of young people to be active in the workplace and schools. We're also going to fuel student camps and retreats. These experiences completely change the heart of students. And we want to have the best student experiences of the Bay Area in 2025 and take as many students as possible to environments that allow them to experience the heart and the presence of Jesus. So this offering will help us create those opportunities, launching Alpha at college campuses and so forth. And then lastly, you're going to see on here a page that says spiritual formation. And we do so much here at Echo to help our community grow in the journey of faith. But next year, I'm excited. God willing, if we have the resources, we're going to finish one of the best projects we've done in our story, which is to develop a brand new innovative app and website that is customized to users to help them with tools for spiritual growth. Our team's working hard on it. We just need the final resources to bring it to fruition. And then I love this, and I know you're going to love celebrating this, but one of our goals next year is to launch a new Echo worship album. Are you excited about that? I can't wait. You know, as you flip this is where I want to ask you to pray. Because we're a no-pressure church. We're not going to, try to put you on the spot, but I want you to take this home and just consider, what's your participation in this? If we all do our part to give above our regular giving, we can reach the goal of $1 million to deepen our impact in our city and region. And it requires some of us to give just $100 extra, some to give $250 extra between now and the end of the year, some $500, and some need to stretch out. I can match my gift with my boss or my company, and I can go 20, 30, 50K. And I hope that if you're a guest here with us today, you know our heart. That we're not a church that creates pressure. If you're here and you just need to be receiving, that's totally okay with us. But for those of you that are part of the Echo family, I want to ask you as one of your pastors to stretch your faith, to not be consumed with consumerism in this season, but to let between now and the end of the year to be the time that you say, God, I'm acknowledging that my time and my place on earth are divinely orchestrated. And for such a time as this, I'm here. And I want to leverage not just my Sundays, but my workplace and my school. Not just the stuff I get, but the stuff I give to open doors of miracles in our region. Your time and your place matter. In Romans 15, there's a blessing the Apostle Paul gives the church that I want to pray and speak over you as we discern our steps together. And all of our campuses, would you stand with me for this moment? Just stand to your feet in Sunnyvale, Fremont, Warehouse, Mez, San Jose, Evening, all of us together. And if you're okay with this, just close your eyes to have a moment between you and God. And the blessing goes like this. It says, may the God of hope, He is the God, by the way, that is the hope to every answer we have. May that God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. What you need is found in Him. In fact, maybe even as I say this, you realize right now that you have not yet called out on Jesus. You've been trying to fill the void of joy and peace with everything else, and this is the moment that you say, God, I want to receive this blessing. So if that's you right there in your heart, say, Jesus, I trust you. I want you. Fill me, God. I don't want to try this on my own anymore. I want you. May the God of hope fill you, receive it, with joy and peace as you trust in Him. It requires your participation. And maybe pause, whatever it is right now that God's saying, would you trust me in this? Just say it back to Him. What's the area? Maybe it's a relationship. He's saying, release it, trust me. It might be the step to get baptized. the step to let your workplace become your worship space. He might be telling you to trust him with your resources and make this the year that you invest into causes that are not about you. Would you say it to him? God, I'm yours. And then it says he would do all of this so that you would overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And Father, that's our prayer today, to be a community so filled up with your presence, with your joy, with your peace. God, that we would overflow to our region, that we would not be content with a broken world without being a part of the solution. God, would you empower us to be a community of faith that goes after the lost and the broken and the lonely of our region, believing that we're here for such a time as this. And for everything you've done, God, for all the lives you've changed, for all the beautiful transformation we've seen, we will give you glory and praise and worship. In Jesus' name, amen. Can we celebrate that God who is worthy